Welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast. So again, today I want to talk about something that everyone constantly asks me, which is how do you negotiate deals? So again, not really finance related today, but I want to talk about how we've gone about negotiating deals in the past and the techniques and some tips and tricks really around kind of what we've done when negotiating deals. So the first tip I would say is come at everything from a position of strength. It's far too easy as an investor developer to go into negotiations and feel like the vendor is the one with the power and to feel as if you're not really offering anything. So it's very easy for the vendor to feel like they have all of the power, and obviously that it just completely ruins negotiations for you. So I would say no matter what, come at it from a position of strength. You are there to present a win-win solution. You are there to present something that everyone's going to be happy with at the end. So it's very easy to look at it and go, oh, well, the vendor owns the land, the vendor's got this, the vendor's got it. Similarly to how people look at private investment, it's very easy when a private investor comes to the table to go, oh, well, they've got the money. Without them, I can't do it. Well, when you're looking at a land negotiation, for example, just look at it from a position of, well, if this vendor doesn't sell me the land, someone else will. There's another plot of land out there somewhere. There's another deal to do somewhere. So that should instantly put you in a position of, I can do this without you. So here's my offer, take it or leave it. And it's, again, very easy to put forward an offer and then the vendor to turn around and say, oh, well, I want a bit more. And for you to kind of cave and go, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, here's a bit more, because you feel like you've got to have that deal. So actually, my first tip was going to be position of strength, but actually, I guess the more we've spoken through it, it's actually talking more about patience. And it's be patient for that deal, be patient for the negotiations. Don't rush into anything. Don't be strong-armed into offering more money. The second tip I would offer is come at it from a position of creativity. Don't just offer, so let's say the land is up for 100 grand. Don't just go in and say, here's £100,000. Try and be a bit more creative about it. Try and say, well, you can have £50,000 up front and then £60,000 later on, or why don't we give you 100,000, but you give us 20,000 back as a vendor finance loan, for example. Try and come up with something creative. You also want to obviously look at things like exchange delay completions. You want to look at option agreements, lease options, all those different creative strategies that are out there. But try and just be a bit different. Try and stand out. Try and come up with something which, again, benefits both sides and possibly gives the vendor that bit of extra cash that maybe they wouldn't have on a straightforward deal. The third tip is don't just present one option. Don't just give one option to the vendor. Give them 2 or 3 different options and make it so that the offer of just a straightforward purchase is actually the worst offer. Try and make it so that if the land's up for 100 grand, you offer them 90 grand as a straightforward purchase, or you offer them 110,000 if they're a bit more creative. Try and make it so that that straightforward option is actually the worst option. And actually by being creative and taking that creative option, they're actually going to end up with a better deal overall, because that creativity allows you to put less money into the deal and thereby actually makes it a better deal for you. So once you've come at it from a position of strength, once you've put a few deals in front of them, once you've been patient, what you'll tend to find is that actually the vendor tends to be pretty pliable, and you're able to mold them how you want to. Now, not every single negotiation is going to go your way. It's just the way of the world, unfortunately, that a lot of the deals you look at, a high percentage of them, they're going to want something straightforward. Their circumstances aren't going to allow that creativity. And that kind of brings us on to the next tip, which is understand the circumstances. Understand what's the narrative behind the vendor wanting to sell. Is there some sort of distress? Have they got to sell because they've got a tax bill coming? Have they got to sell because interest rates have increased? Have they got to sell because they want to move on to something else? Are they just selling because they just don't want it anymore? Are they selling because they've got the planning permission on the land, and do they want to realize that profit? And it's understanding what it is they actually want to get from all of this, because some vendors are going to want the cash straight away, without a shadow of a doubt. There's going to be a usage there somewhere in the future, and some just aren't going to be that bothered. They're happy to wait 12 months, 18 months, whatever it may be. So understanding that background and the rationale behind why they're selling and what their position is gives you the upper hand in all the negotiations, because if you know that based on their circumstances they need as much money as quickly as possible, you then know from your negotiation, well, they're not going to take a deferred payment. They're not going to take something over 12, 18 months because they need the money now. However, because they need the money now, they might take 90 grand rather than 100 grand, for example. If they're happy to wait, there's then a conversation of, well, actually, okay, you don't need the money. That means you might wait. You might even just take the asking price over that period of time. Or it may just be a case of you're happy to leave a bit of cash in there for a bit longer. The thing with them leaving cash in as well is that your negotiation for that is, and this is kind of a negotiation of deferred payments of vendor finances, if they took that money out now and they didn't have a use for it, if they didn't have something else they wanted to go and buy, if they didn't have a tax bill that needed paying or something like that, you're then in a position of, well, actually, you don't want that cash just laying around. You want to be able to make a return on that investment. Here you go, we'll give you 10%, 12% per annum, whatever the figure may be, rather than it just sitting in the bank and making absolutely nothing. So there's that negotiation as well of, okay, well, you don't need the money, but here you go, leave this bit in, we'll give you an interest return on it. It's going to be bank beating. You're not going to get this anywhere else. And hopefully that will kind of get over that hurdle of, I don't really want to leave this money in. The last part of the negotiation we've found, and this is kind of the most important bit, so you've got over the hurdle of, do they need the money now or do they not need the money now? You've got over the hurdle of what do they actually want for the property? You've got over all the other hurdles that come up with the negotiation. The last bit is, how are you going to securitize? So if they're going to leave something in the deal, are you going to put PGs down? Are you going to let them have a debenture? Are you going to let them have a first charge or a second charge? What's that plan at that point? And what we have found is actually that's the hardest bit to negotiate. Negotiating a purchase price, negotiating a deal structure, everything else actually is probably the easiest part. When you get to negotiating security, that's where solicitors get involved. And solicitors will just notoriously completely scupper a negotiation. They don't care about what you've negotiated to date. They are going to completely rip it up and destroy it, because they then get involved and they say, well, we don't think you should do this because of X, Y, Z. We don't think you should do this because of X, Y, Z. So they'll naturally put the vendor off, because they'll say, oh, well, we don't think you've got enough security here. We would advise you not to do this. So at that point, what you then need to do is, when you're kind of negotiating these securities, is make sure the vendor understands, look, your solicitor is going to advise you to take a first charge. Your solicitor is going to advise you to do X, Y, Z. However, because we've got development finance, because we've got a bridging loan or whatever it may be, you can't have a first charge. You have to have a second charge. There's just no other way around it. Or it may be that they say, oh, we want a debenture over the limited company. Okay, but you can't because of X, Y, Z. And what we found previously is that if you sit with the vendor and kind of explain that and say, look, you can't have this because of X, Y, Z, they're far more open to that negotiation than you can't have this because I don't want to give it to you. It's just far easier to have that negotiation. You can't have it because someone's already got it. So we've found that bit of the negotiation has been tough, but if done in the right way, actually is relatively easy to get over those hurdles. So they're just a few tips and tricks we've sort of found over the last 3 to 5 years of how best to negotiate deals, and some of the hurdles that we've come across when negotiating deals. And fingers crossed, hopefully that gives you a few tips and tricks moving forward into your own negotiations. But hopefully you've enjoyed this, and I will catch you on the next one.